And it is really something that you have these different forms of sexual orientation, which were considered mental illnesses, because that's really what they are. It's talking about gender dysmorphia and body dysphoria, or vice versa, gender dysmorphia and body dysphoria. I can't remember it now because the two terms kind of are used interchangeably. With when someone looks in the mirror and they see something that isn't there. So in other words, you're born with a penis, but you see a vagina, you see breasts where there are none. And these are mental illnesses that have now been given pretty much a jurisdiction in society that is calling it a lifestyle, and they removed it from the DSM, which is pretty much the Bible of mental health, which deals with all kinds of mental illnesses. And it's really interesting because when we talked about the fact that they had that study where they pretty much dealt with almost 500,000 people to try and find the quote unquote gay gene, which would have pretty much given credence to when homosexuals or other people who practice some form of deviant sexual expression, and that's how it was actually listed. So it was considered deviant. It wasn't considered normal. So deviant, the term deviant has taken on a really negative connotation with all this politically correct, power that these people have been given. And like I said, I don't believe anybody should be abused or mistreated. Whatever you want to do with their personal life, that is not a problem. The issue is when you take it publicly and you try to force it on everyone else. No one's trying to force heterosexuality on these people. They're trying to force their ways of life on people who don't want it. Whether it's the young black male who had the long hair and they told him either he should braid his hair or put him in a dress.
Yeah.
You had the young girl, 10 years old in the UK, who was I think Jehovah's Witness or one of the Christian sects. And when they were teaching her about deviant sexuality, she said she doesn't believe this should be taught to children, and they expelled her from school for 2 weeks. You had another guy in the UK that was about 16 who stopped his teaching in the middle of class, like, why are we learning this? And he was expelled. Matter of fact, they kicked him completely out of the school, and he was cursed out by his white male teacher. So this is something, and if you study the history of Rome, now mind you, being gay and practicing pederasty, which is males having deviant sex with young boys, that was a norm in their society. They only had sex with women to procreate. They believed the highest expression of love was between two men, or a boy and a male, and an older male. And if you study Rome, when Rome was collapsing, the sexual deviance was completely over the top. It was just so far reaching
Rampant.
that it was a major part of the fall and collapse of Rome. Not just the financial situation in Rome, but the social situation had gotten so toxic that there was just no cohesiveness in the society. And we're seeing that in America.
Before you
Recently, we talked.
get
Go
into
ahead.
that, Ross, before you get too
Mhm.
deep, can you? This is gonna be interesting for all of the listeners. Can you give us the title that they gave those people who was taking those boys over there in Europe?
They were
Mentors.
mentors. Yeah, the term mentor actually comes from the story of Mentor and Telemachus, and pretty much Telemachus was the son of Odysseus, and Odysseus had to go on a mission. So if I remember, because we read that story on the show, but if I remember correctly, he left Telemachus in the care of Mentor. And during the time that Odysseus was away, mentor, which and they talk about in the meaning of the term mentor, they talk about being a confidant, and being a confidant is someone with which you share a secret. The question is, what kind of secret? And the secret was that in Greece they called it putting manhood, or no, injecting manhood into the buttocks. So that's what they considered sodomy. Sodomy was a man with a boy in this instance injecting manhood, which was really semen, into this boy's buttocks. So this is the mentality you're dealing with here. And I talked about the fact, because I wrote an essay about this dealing with white supremacy, that in ancient Greece, the term gymnasium means to exercise naked. So when the adults in Greece would send their children to the gymnasium, they knew that these children would be around males, older males, and they would be actually exercising butt naked. And on the way, they had the rape of boys got so was such an epidemic that they had to hire what they call pedagogues, and these were people who were hired to protect the children of the wealthy on their way to the gymnasium because they would literally, it was almost like Prostitution Row, where they'll be walking by and there'll be men, picking out the cutest boys that's walking down the street. Some of them would just straight take them, you know what I mean? Like straight take them in some alley and rape them, or take them into one of the houses of ill repute
Well,
and rape them there. So
let's
they
just
had these
say
people who
they
had
took advantage of them for the
right.
younger listeners.
Exactly. And what happened was eventually there was a system where some of these men would pay off the pedagogues. Pedagogues weren't necessarily treated right. They were kind of like enslaved to their parents. And they weren't treated right and they weren't paid properly. So they would get money on the side. And as a result, they would allow certain people's children to be misused like that. So this is documented. So what I'm saying is, you're looking at this society now. We recently talked about the fact that, and I had the article. I don't have it tonight, but we dealt with it before, where pedophiles are fighting to become a part of the alphabet community. And if you study the homosexuals, LGBTQ, whatever other letters you put in it, they're trying to distance themselves from that because they're saying that modern homosexuals aren't into that. But again, if you study what Dr. Wilson said as a mental health practitioner and Dr. Umar Johnson as a mental health practitioner, they both said 95% of the black and brown people who they treated that were homosexual, they basically found that the driving force for them being homosexual was being misused, abused, and pedophilically raped before the age of 12. So there's an intimate tie between homosexuality and pederasty. Historically, that is playing itself out today. And in San Francisco, there was an article I had here. It's from Humans Are Free, and they were talking about the fact, humansarefree.com, that in San Diego State, I'm going to just read a couple sections out of it. San Diego State University is teaching students that pedophilia could merely be considered to be an alternative, quote-unquote, sexual orientation. This comes months after we learned that school officials in California think it's, quote-unquote, really important to teach children about pedophilia and pederasty in the classroom because it is a, quote-unquote, sexual orientation. Quote, an actual topic we discussed in class today, a state university, after watching an 8-minute Vice News video showcasing self-identified pedophiles. This is going to be mainstreamed, unquote, tweeted Alex Mazzara. So this is what they're doing. They're normalizing it, and they're psychosocially conditioning the public to accept it because they're going down the same path that Rome went, where you're going to openly see older men with little boys. And it's
accolades to black people who are carrying their agenda, but who are really mediocre. Just like somebody brought up Lil Nas X. Perfect example. Lil Nas X is a novelty rapper. There is absolutely nothing special or spectacular about Lil Nas X. There's nothing special about it. And I'm not trying to disparage the guy. He's not an exceptionally talented guy. He's not an exceptionally good dancer. You saw those dance moves he was doing on one of them award shows. They were stiff as fuck. And they're putting him on Time Magazine. They're overly praising this guy because he has an agenda. You know, they overly praise you. Just like with Lizzo, the sister, they overly praise her and parade her around and laugh at her. You know, they do that. They did the same thing, remember, with Gabby Sidibe. They get the overweight black woman who's morbidly obese and then start parading her around in fashion magazines. They've always done that as an insult. It's a backhanded compliment. They like parading us. I call it King Konging. They like to King Kong us around. And when you look at the movie King Kong, what did they do? A bunch of rich white people got King Kong, got him on stage. Oh, God, look at that. Look at that big old monkey. Look at that big fucking gorilla. Wow. Look at it. They're King Konging niggas. Yeah? And we're so desperate for approval, we go for Billy Porter. They put him in clown outfits and dress him up and parade him around and talk about he's the first gay this, and then Lil Nas X is the first gay that. And what they do, they parade Negroes around as their mascots and then piggyback off of their fake accomplishments, which they orchestrated. So when they get Lil Nas X and says he's the first rapper to have an open gay rapper to have a #1 record that lasts the longest on the charts, the white LGBT community, who's inherently anti-black, they get to chalk that up as a victory for them. Billy Porter, whenever he goes out there and they give him fake accolades and fake praises, and so he's the first openly gay person to get an Emmy, they chalk that up as something on the white LGBT resume. See, what they're doing, they're creating LGBT history right now. Remember, they're going to start teaching LGBT history in schools. The problem is, there is no LGBT history. There is no such thing as LGBT history. That's why nobody can tell you what it is. What the hell is LGBT history? There is no such thing as LGBT history. What do you mean? Because we already talk about people who are LGBT in the context of history. When we talk about J. Edgar Hoover, he's LGBT history, but see, they don't want to own that. They don't want to own all the negatives that he did. Alexander the so-called Great was LGBT. Remember, he was gay or bisexual. Alexander the Great was out there tearing up pussy all over the place over there. Greek history is LGBT history. I was just over in Greece. Dude, you should see some of the statues over there. You should see just hell. You at a store somewhere, and they have souvenirs where dudes are busting it open on each other. I mean, it's out in the open over there. You understand? So what they're going to do, they have to try to incorporate their history into some type of civil rights struggle. See, this is why they latch on to our civil rights. See, they don't have a history. So they have to make it seem like they are part of some kind of resistance, some type of civil rights struggle. And this is why they're latching on to us. And this is why they get black mascots out here so that they can do things with them and promote them a certain way and then chop that up as a victory for the LGBT community. Just like the Stonewall thing. They chop that up as an LGBT historical event, but that was really a racial event. Yeah? And remember, I told y'all about the whole game is all about transhumanism. They're trying to create a whole medical industry out of this. And another thing, they focus on this trans thing because in order to be trans, you have to be on medicines all your life. You understand? And what they want to do, they're creating a trans industry. And by creating a trans industry and trying to focus on black society, what they'll do, they'll try to stop our birth rates. It's real heavy. It's real heavy, family. This is why what they want to do, they want to start recruiting through pedophilia. They want to start recruiting through pedophilia. When they start promoting, they get these trans activists and all these people talking about going, let's get unisex bathrooms and let's do drag queen readings. Why do y'all think, let's just talk turkey. Why do y'all think they're promoting that so heavy? Why is it so important for a drag queen to read to a child? Why is it so important for there to be unisex bathrooms? Why is that so important? What's the desire? What benefit are we getting from having a drag queen read to children? There's only one value from that. That is to introduce pedophilia to the children. Multiple cases have come out where some of these people doing these drag queen readings, many of them are registered pedophiles. A lot of people are complaining that these people going to libraries and schools reading to these children, many of them are pedophiles. They're convicted pedophiles. As a matter of fact, a lot of these activists, some of these people who are the main ones going out here talking about how we need to create unisex bathrooms and all this, some of these trans activists, when you look at them, like this person here, this is a trans activist right here. Name was Dakota Neves. And this person was an activist, and he produced videos of himself abusing young children sexually. Now, this is one of the main people who was out here talking about we need to remove the male-female bathrooms. Transgender activist facing 50 years in prison for raping a 4-year-old girl on video. Now, I'm showing the picture here. Now, look at this. Transgender man who 7 months ago urged locals in Lawrenceville to vote yes on a veto referendum enabling those who identify as transgender to access locker rooms and similar facilities designated for the opposite sex has now been slapped with the sexual exploitation of a child charge. Now, what's interesting, family, when you look this story up of Jacob Neves, that's his real name. Now, most of the stories, when you look up, they'll show something like this. They'll show a stock photo. They wouldn't show this person's picture. Now, this is heavy. This is how the media is in on this stuff, too. Remember, it's big money people orchestrating this whole trans agenda. Many stories about this trans man, and I'm not going to call him a woman, that's a trans man. Many stories omitted the picture of this person. Not only that, many stories kept referring to him as a woman. So if you read a lot of the mainstream articles on this, you wouldn't know that it was a trans person doing this. You wouldn't know that it was a trans person because they were using stock photos in a lot of the mainstream media outlets. So I'm like, wait, when I first heard the story, I'm like, wait, something is weird. How come they're not showing this person's face? How come they're not showing this woman's face? And also, why is the woman named Jacob? Those two things caught me. Jacob Neves? Well, a woman named Jacob had molested some kids. That's weird. Then I started looking in the story. And then I actually looked up the case. Dude. Man, I didn't even post the details of the case on here. It was like, well, Jacob Neves, who's a trans identifying person, was on a website called Kick, one of those websites, and she didn't know that she was talking to an undercover agent, and she was sending pornographic images of her with her penis in the mouth of a 4-year-old. Like, what? Her penis? I mean, when you look at the actual report, it says this. I'm like, come on, man. Come on. Man, I ain't going for this bullshit, dude. And if we resist this, all of a sudden, we supposed to be homophobic or transphobic if we resist that type of fucking filth. That's filth, man. They're trying to break black society by promoting this type of stuff.